I'm Kevin Dean. I'm the CEO of Momentum Number of Partners. We're glad you're here. I'm here with Andrea Hill, our Chief Programs Officer, and Annie Schmitz, our Director of Programs and Research. I always struggle with her title because there's so many words with it. But we also have some very special guests. We normally don't allow directors of development in our CEO, COO peer learning group, but this time I thought it was really important to hear directly from the development staff in Memphis themselves about how to develop them. This is their experience, and so we want to make sure that they have a say in this conversation for sure. As you know, our compensation study, Annie or Andrea, if y'all can put that in the chat, we released a compensation study last year in August, and it revealed a lot about professional development in this town, a lot about what people are doing to keep their staffs happy and retain staff. And there were some really problematic revelations in all of this. The first one being that directors of development or development staff in general are the least likely to be professionally developed of any staff member in an organization. So 97% of CEOs are professionally developing themselves, whereas there are only about 61% of them are professionally developing their development staff, and only about 60% are professionally developing their administrative staff. So there's this weird thing going on where the people who are responsible for bringing in the money are not being developed like everybody else. And as a former director of development, I can tell you that there is no bigger weight that you feel when you first start that job than other people's salaries and other people's jobs and the clients and communities you're serving, and the fear of failing all of them by not raising enough money. So professionally developing our development staff is really, really important. So today I'm joined by three awesome people, some of my favorite people in the nonprofit space. I want to introduce them. Jeanette O'Brien, she's with Collage Dance Collective. She's also the incoming chair of AFP, which is the Association of Fundraising Professionals, which is the local networking and professional development chapter, local chapter of AFP for fundraising staff. And then I want to introduce Candace Lester. She is if I get your title wrong, I'm sorry, Director of Development for Soulsville. Is that correct? Great. And then Lenox Warren, she is the Director of Development for Hope House, a place where I used to work in her position 13 years ago. So Lenox has done a fantastic job over the past few years, coming in as a first time, I think you were a first time Director of Development, correct?
I've been at Teach for America for a couple of years before that as their Director of Development, but yes, relatively new in the world. Yeah.
Gotcha. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be asking them some questions, getting their feedback, and really hearing from them on what they feel like they need, some of the gaps in their professional development journey as they've grown into these amazing fundraisers. And then we'll turn over to if y'all have some questions for them. This is a topic that you might not have been thinking a lot about, but it's something that we hopefully over the next year will have a lot more professional development opportunities for fundraising staff, but also this will be in the back of people's heads that, hey, these people are raising money for us. We need to make sure that they're doing it as awesomely as possible. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to ask the question, and y'all feel free to unmute. If you don't have an answer, you don't have to answer. But feel free to just jump in there, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Sound good? While we do that, though, for everybody else who's here, who's not on the screen, spotlighted on the screen, if you can put your name and your organization in the chat, just so we can keep tally of who's here. We'd love to know everybody that has joined us today, because I can't see anybody except for our panelists. So I'd love to see who is here. So my first question is, when you first became a development staff member, at some point you made that transition into development, which is a big transition. What were some of the first hurdles that you encountered as a development staff member, like in the first maybe 180 days? Like what were the oh my gosh moments that like, I wish I had known this, or nobody told me this, and how did you overcome those, or how did you get the information you needed to overcome those? So tell us some of these pitfalls that maybe executive directors don't really think about, that in their first 180 days, what maybe they might need to be adding to the first year plan for those fundraisers. So any of you three can unmute and let us know.
I'll go. So I don't know about all the organizations that are on here, but for a lot of organizations in Memphis, the development team is a one-man or two-man show. And so I know, like in my first job when I came in, nobody else in the whole office had any development experience. So there was nobody to teach me anything. And I got the job because of certain skills, transferable skills that could come over. I was a social worker previously. So I was able to work with people well, and build relationships was my strength, but I had no idea how to make a fundraising plan. I had no idea how to put on an event. I had never gone to a fundraising event before because I was a social worker and had no money. So I had no idea, and I had nobody in the office to tell me. And luckily I was able to find a development director in a different office. I've also talked to many development directors at other organizations and was able to seek out that information for myself. But I think something, that obviously a CEO could do for that person is to help make those connections. So I just happened to live in Memphis for a long time at that point and was able to make those connections myself. But being able to introduce your development person to somebody else in that world to go to and say, how do I create a fundraising plan? Like the very basics, even like what are step-by-step putting on an event? What should I think about? What are things you've failed at that I want to know so, I can learn? That was sort of the biggest thing, that there's just not a lot of people usually in your organization that have those skills that can teach that to you.
I think oh, go ahead.
I think we started at the same time. But no, I was just gonna kind of build off what you said, Lenox. I completely agree. I think when I first started in development, the biggest hurdles were, now the most basic things, but it was finding that balance between desk work, networking, donor meetings, and then building the relationships with your colleagues. Because for myself, and then really all the other development people I know, that's the hardest thing to do is find the time at your desk that you need to get like paperwork done, while also understanding that it's just as valuable, if not more so, to have really strong relationships with your coworkers, because they're providing all the information that you need to build these great donor relationships and tell these stories, and how important it is to be out in the community so that you're that embodiment of your organization, and you're really kind of being the voice and amplifying. And what that means is there's a very small amount of time for you to do the work that allows you to report out to the board, or to put those sponsorship proposals together, or write those great narratives for the grants that you've built the relationships for, and you've had the meetings and you're ready to actually apply. But like, when do I find the time to sit down and write it, and how do I plan that and protect it so that I'm writing effectively? And that was, for me, was the biggest challenge. And kind of what you said, Lenox, is it was talking to other development professionals and going to kind of the networking things at Momentum, which is where I met a lot of people in development, and ended up building the relationships that helped me get into AFP later and meet even more people in fundraising, excuse me. So I think it's development is one of those places where soft skills is probably your most important skill set. And that's usually built through spending time with other people versus, I'm spending time in a classroom. And that's not to say technical skills aren't important in development. They absolutely are. But it's just it's an interesting field. So the way that we develop, I think, has to be thought about, because it's not going to look the same as the way you professionally develop somebody in your finance department or someone who's delivering programs, because it's the skill combination is quite different.
Well, you guys have basically said everything. So, I mean, I will just piggyback off of all of that and go back a little bit further. When I first started in development was in 2008 at the National Civil Rights Museum. And I will tell you that coming into an office with no one there to kind of steer and guide you in the middle of MLK, the 40th anniversary, and everybody's just kind of throwing things at you, and you're just really trying to grasp hold of, I don't know anything about development, but we need volunteers. We need this. We got to plan this event. We got to do this. We got people coming. It was so much, that nobody took the time. And I think that's one of the things when you come in, there is no onboarding. Like there is nothing that says like, hey, this is what we've been doing. This is how we do these things. There was literally no manual, no, you go to a corporation, they give you a book and this is what this department does. None of that was in place when I started. Now, fortunately for them, when I left the museum, I did leave a development manual that I had created on our standard operating procedures that, I felt like if someone comes after me, this is how we do these things. This is how we receive money. This is how we fundraise. This is like all of those protocols were put in there because I didn't have that when I started. I literally did not have any of that. But like, Candace said, the thing that connected me, I remember meeting Yvonne Adams, and she was working with a volunteer Memphis or whatever. And that's how I got connected with Kevin. And, I started doing a lot of training through them and then going to getting connected with Dovia. And so, having all of these opportunities for outside things. At first, the director didn't understand, me saying, hey, I want to go out and, be able to do these things or partner with those. But, eventually we got an NEA grant for staff development. And that kind of gave them an opportunity to now enforce our learning and our growth. And so we were able to be able to partake a little bit more in that arena. But I definitely feel like, if, CEOs or executive directors of organizations will understand that there needs to be something in place to kind of help us when we first get into the position. We need to be able to have, like she said, a balance. There was literally no balance. Like literally even the days off, you still were working, people calling you on your phone. Like we literally have no time. And then they want things done. Like we need $50,000 in 2 weeks. We got to get this. We got an event coming. We got to, it's like everything is like, I need it yesterday. And I think, there has to be some balance and there has to be some time, because I did notice that the development department was the only department in the organization that had all of this pressure. Like we were just all stressed out. Marketing wasn't as stressed out. Finance was not stressed out, but development was literally just pulling our hair out, just stressed out. So those were some of the biggest hurdles I think that I had, starting out. But overcoming those was really great in finding connectivity with folks like, Volunteer Memphis at the time and Dovia, and eventually growing into AFP and, Momentum and all of the different work and resources that they made available to us.
So of all this, I think there are a lot of great takeaways here. One, everybody needs a mentor, and so make sure you find your development staff a mentor, internally or externally. I had a person that I could call and ask really dumb questions to, and sometimes he would laugh at me, but I'd rather him laugh at me than Betty DuPont or going, why did I hire this guy? And then the letting the development staff out of their office is really important. And just because you don't have just because you're supposed to be raising money doesn't mean there's not time for the networking, and there's learning that happens with this informal networking too. So people need a circle of people that they can look to and count on that have similar jobs. So you gotta let people out. I heard one time I had this person call me and she was freaking out because she had taken this big development job and she was a first-time development director. And she sat down with her boss, and her boss said, basically, I don't care what you have to say. I need you to bring in $500,000 within the next 6 months of new money. and like she had no onboarding plan, she had nothing. It was just go raise money. And I think that's where sometimes executive directors and CEOs falter big time. We don't think through that, especially if people haven't raised money before. You know, they just, you're going to jump in and start bringing in all this cash. That's not really how it works. So giving some grace there is definitely important. Well, thank you all for that. Thank you all for those. And Jeanette, whoever followed behind you loves you for creating that document. And what a great document to have. You know, people don't think about having that for their development department. What ways have you professionally developed yourself through the years? You know, are there specific resources you recommend? Like what are, you know, like, I always say the impetus is on both the organization and the individual to professionally develop themselves. So what have y'all done to develop yourselves? What's worked, what hasn't? Let us know.
Well, for me, you know, one of the biggest things was getting connected and building those relationships, you know, and I mentioned, you know, Dovia and Kevin, and, you know, Kevin talks about a mentor, but he was literally my mentor and he didn't know it. I always tell him that, you know, having somebody to really push me through, and then, you know, giving me opportunities. Like I never, when I got into fundraising, I didn't even know there was a national organization for volunteers and a conference to attend, people to meet, you know, and then those relationships that I've met through those conferences, you know, they are like, oh, go to this site or go to this site. And then, you know, just having the opportunity to even Google if there's an idea or a question or something that I don't feel like I know a lot of, then, you know, just Google it and it will give me, like, you know, the Chronicles of Philanthropy, you know, just all of these different resources and networks that provide, you know, blogs and conversations. AFP is really great. You know, once you become a member, they actually have like a dashboard where people ask questions, they upload documents. You know, if I've never done a development plan, you know, hey, I'm having to do this development plan. Does anybody have any, you know, templates that they're willing to share? And they were really great about providing things, you know, and bringing in those resources to kind of help, you know, sustain and getting connected with all of my peers here in the city of Memphis. You know, I loved having those networking opportunities. I still have relationships from 2008 all the way to now, you know, that I've built, and they've kind of helped push me. Getting certification, just even knowing that, oh, you can get a CFRE certification just so that people can take you seriously in fundraising. So just understanding and knowing, but I never would have, you know, gotten that had I not been connected to these individuals in these, you know, outside meeting places. So definitely I would say, you know, having, you know, affiliations with other organizations, and definitely, you know, just for me, the biggest thing is Googling, you know, what I need. So those are some of the many ways that I've kind of developed myself over time. Oh, and then I just invite myself to conversations that I'm not a part of, but I want to listen in. So, and I will say this to some of the CEOs, sometimes it's important to bring your development person to the table, even if you're just introducing them, because the only way we can understand what is happening on both sides is to be a part of the conversation, you know, to know what the corporation or another organization wants and how we can provide that through what it is that we do. A lot of times when they come out of a meeting, they'll come and say, well, hey, you need to, you know, go on this line, you need to apply for this, or you need to do that, but you have no clear understanding about the other side. So I definitely would say just being in the rooms and sitting at tables, you know, just to be an ear to listen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that for me, Jeanette, you said a lot of what I was going to say is the researching things for yourself. Google is so helpful, if only because it brings you to like the fundraising bloggers like Kashana Palmer and the Artful Asker and community-centric fundraising. And there are a lot of resources out there, and there are a lot of other fundraisers who have realized that there is kind of an opportunity to create professional development resources for fundraisers, but it requires the time and the space to actually read them, and then the grace to try those new things that you're learning about, and the runway to fail, because that's how learning and skill growth happens. And I think in development, the idea of not hitting your goal, or even just the concept of it, immediately strikes fear in the heart of all fundraisers. They're like, I'm not going to have a job next fiscal year because I created this plan and I really wanted to do it. And, I've only been fundraising, a year maybe or 2 years at this point. So most of what I'm trying is new, and I can't guarantee you that's going to work, but I've definitely put everything I have into it. And so I think that definitely contributes to stress for people in development, because there's very little room not to meet the goal, because like Kevin said earlier, you're very aware of the fact that your job is to pay the salaries of all of your coworkers and to make sure that the work that you're doing that you really, really believe in continues to happen. So it's not just you didn't hit a goal, it's that you didn't make sure somebody could feed their family, or you didn't make sure that these really essential services that the community needs, are available and are going to happen. So I think that in addition to like skill development, what was helpful for me is a very close relationship with my CEO, and understanding that the way that I think about it is it's my job to tee things up, and then it's my CEO's job to take a swing, right? So if we're not fundraising together, then we're not going to do a good job as an organization and in terms of bringing money in. Because I think there are some leaders that get that and are so good at it and are just really excellent fundraisers. And then I think that in other cases, there's the idea that like, I've hired this development person, now I don't have to deal with that icky asking for money thing anymore, which is not the case at all, because real fundraising happens when it's, a 50-50 partnership, because it's truth be told, a lot of donors would really rather talk to you, as the CEO. They want to know about the work that you're doing. And if they're talking to a fundraiser, no matter how good our people skills are, money is always right there in the middle of the conversation. And so it's not always the most effective, and not to say that your fundraisers aren't effective. We are, right? Because the money comes in, but it is often a more meaningful experience for a potential donor or a sponsor, or to speak with you. And I think that your fundraisers are really good at prepping you for that, and making sure that the conversations are there and helping you figure out timing. And, like Jeanette said, going to the meetings with you. But when I had a great relationship with my CEO, that's when I grew the most, is because I had the time and space to say, hey, I want to try this new thing. I think it'll really work. But if it doesn't, is that okay? And then let's have a backup plan for if that doesn't work. And then the other side of that is we ended up raising money together. And the teamwork is what really started bringing funds in that were sustainable, and then building relationships that grew over time, because there was a relationship with the organization and not just your fundraiser, which made it more meaningful.
I won't repeat everything y'all already said, but yes, agreed. Ditto to everything y'all said. I quickly jotted down just my favorite things. I did the Before You Ask class at a CC. I don't know if they're still doing that, but that was my favorite thing that I did as a new fundraiser. It's extremely helpful, and it really gets into the nitty-gritty of exactly how to do certain things, which I love, because sometimes you'll take a class and they'll just talk about their experience, but won't actually get down into like, here's how you build a great mission statement, or here's how you have a great elevator speech. And they really do that and make you do it in front of everybody in practice. So I love that class. As I grew in my job, then the AFP opportunities were huge. I think Kevin actually might have had a big part in that, making that more for people of all different levels, because I think previously it was really for beginner fundraisers. Now I find that there's much more opportunities, especially like networking lunches are really helpful. Even my executive director comes with me to those because she gets a lot out of them too. And they are for everybody. You don't have to be a member of AFP to go to their like lunch and learns. And then the other one was obviously momentum classes that I wrote down. And those, again, are like great because they have all different levels. So as I've grown, like there are things that may not apply to me anymore, like maybe a basic grant writing class, but the girl who works on my team, she might need that. And so I'll pass it to her, but then I might take something different. So there's just a lot of great resources with momentum, but those are probably the three that I found were the most beneficial outside of like pure networking and learning, just like Candace and Jeanette said. I mean, that's huge. Having meetings with donors. I ask my donors all the time for help. I'm like, you've been to a lot of events. you tell me what you like, and so just even talking to donors and getting help from them has been hugely helpful.
Great. The next question I was going to ask about is about how a current employer or your former employer really helped supported your growth as a development staff member. It sounds like y'all kind of covered that. Candace, you kind of covered that, but do y'all have any other examples of people that have supervised you in development roles that have really given you what you needed to thrive and set you up for success, or any examples of that? I do know that, like, I worked at Hope House Lenox, and when I started there, like, I was so shocked because it was such a culture shift from where I was before. Betty DuPont would be like, "Oh yeah, you want to go to that conference? Yeah, sign up. Yeah. Oh, you want to go to the Alliance for Nonprofit Excellence training? Absolutely." And I was so not used to having somebody that would do that for me. So I will forever be appreciative of her. But are there other things, Jeanette or Candace or Lenox?
Well, I totally agree with that. When I started at the museum, I will tell you, and Beverly Robertson, I give her accolades all the time for being that person. She's such a shareable person, and she was one of the strongest influences behind my growth, along with my director, who came a year after I had been there working by myself, because the director who was there with me and hired me ended up leaving and getting another job. So for a year, I worked in development by myself with no idea about anything. But people like Beverly Robertson, she would definitely say, Jeanette, come in this meeting. You need to be sitting in here. And I learned so much just from being invited to conversations, and just hearing, what was being said. So definitely, she did a lot of that. And then my new director, once she came in, she really started to see where my strengths were, and she started to build on those strengths and say, hey, I really see you doing this, or I see you doing that. And let's see, she signed up for Saad and Shaw, for a lot of their training for me, and find some conferences, look for things, and whatever you want to do, she kind of supported, me being able to participate and go to a lot of the different, conferences, whether it was Dobie, or whether it was learning about museums and AAAM, just whatever the conference was that was going to bring me another level of growth. And I found myself growing a whole lot really quickly. Our finance director too, she was really great, because a lot of times in development, if you're not, in those conversations, you still have to work with a budget. And the chief financial officer at the museum was great. She would literally sit down and walk me through creating and developing my budget for my department and for what I was held accountable for. And she would periodically, tell me, she's like, Jeanette is probably one of the very few people who is going to stick to this budget. So I learned a lot, just from them. So that is one of the things that I definitely would say, just having their support. And then I've been, working with people, and they say, I don't know anything about development, so you're on your own. I'm just like, okay. So, it's been a little bit of both.
I think really quickly, I just want to add, when you mentioned budget, Jeanette, it made me think about the, and really Kevin helped me figure out how to get this added to the support that I have in my job now. But professional development is now added as like a line item in our budget. And in the notes section, there's kind of an explanation of what that means for development. So professional development for us is, classes at Momentum and networking and making sure that we have a Momentum membership. But then it also means, room in the budget to have coffee with, my peers, because that really shouldn't come out of my team's personal money. Like that is about developing yourself professionally, and it's a professional development expense. So I know that's not always possible for every organization, but thinking about it in a different way. And then having the room to build an hour into my workday where I don't do anything but read. And that's the one thing that I do, because and when I say I mean my team and I, we read for at least an hour every day.
Awesome. What a cool thing that you can read for an hour a day. That's my staff. I'm waiting for Annie and Andrea to suggest that now. I'd be open to that. That'd be great.
Right.
So, Jeanette, did you have something you were about to say?
Oh, no, I was just supporting the fact that, I wish I had time to read too, because right now I'm a development department of pretty much one.
Mm.
And, there is so much that has to be done. I pull information, they tease me all the time because I'm one of those that has to print things and look at it. I just can't keep reading on the computer screen. So I have like tons of stuff on my desk. Like one day I'm going to sit down and I'm going to go through this and read it. So I do think, having the opportunity to really build some time in our schedule, to be able to kind of re-equip our brains and update ourselves. We are computers. Sometimes we need a self-update, on our information. And there's a lot of information that's out there that's really great information. So just building that, I think that's a really great idea to have that time built into your schedule. So yes.
That's awesome. So we talked about all the stuff that you were given when you became a development person, and let's talk about what's missing. So, and this is possibly just conjecture, possibly personal experience. What was missing in your professional development, or what have you seen in your peers that's really missing as far as to be a well-rounded director of development? What might CEOs overlook in all of this? And I've got some ideas, but I want to hear from y'all first.
Kind of piggybacking off what we said in the last question, I mean, just making sure that we have full access. I know I've been in a job before where I didn't get full access, and it's really hard for me to write a grant, create a budget when I don't understand how the organizational budget's made or why we have certain funds and certain programs. And then as Kevin said, I mean, she gives me full access to everything. I mean, I already know so much because I'm making these budgets and writing these grants. So it's really helpful to be on the other side of like, how are these created? And so I definitely think that is, to me, the biggest thing, because when you don't have full access, you just don't have the whole picture. And when you're writing a grant or making an ask, like you really need that whole picture, especially to field questions about programming. And I also feel like development directors deserve that because they do have a lot on their shoulders, and we are responsible for bringing in so many funds. We deserve that information to really understand the whole programming.
I agree with you, Lenox. Understanding, being a part, even if you're just fly on the wall, from the time a new programming idea is just an idea, and just being able to watch it develop really enriches our ability to create a compelling case for support, because we get it. And that's how you help other people fall in love with something, is you have a good understanding of it. And I think the other thing, it's not an issue for me anymore. Again, thank you, Kevin, for being like my sounding board and cheerleader and mentor in so many other ways. But goal setting for development, if it's not led by development, then it just doesn't end up being very effective. And I think that's something that was an issue for me, and thankfully isn't anymore, but it's an issue for some of my peers that I've seen, is when the budgets are made for the next year, sometimes they're told what they're going to raise. And one of the challenges is that if you're really involved in the fundraising community, you know what the next year is going to look like. You have a good idea of it, and you can kind of forecast like what your grants are possible, like what really is a stretch. And so if you're not a part of that goal setting process, then your stress immediately goes up also. And there's a really deep feeling that you're not necessarily set up for success, which may or may not be a professional development thing, but it's definitely a mental health, can I actually do my job thing, which has been a big help for me. And I think I see it not play out in the best way for some people I know that work in development as well.
Yeah, well, I agree with Lenox and Candace as well. Just giving access is so important. And a lot of times you have limited information, it limits you. And I'm like Candace, I get frustrated when I have to keep going back to you and saying, okay, well, what is this or what is this? Because it's not in a place where I can reach it. I don't have access to it. You have access to it. And now I have to keep emailing you to get this information. So I definitely think, having access is really important. And, and being, like you said, really transparent when it comes down to what our fundraising goals are and being supportive of those goals. A lot of times, they do have very, strong, budgets like Collage. We have a huge budget. We have, conservatory, we have like professional dance company, we actually have the organization itself. So there are a lot of different, things happening, that I'm responsible for being a part of the conversation on. And sometimes, you have to just kind of make yourself, just say, hey, I need to be in that meeting, or I need to, when you're meeting with them, I know you're talking about whatever, but I would just like to sit in on the conversation. And sometimes it's taking the initiative to kind of place yourself in there, because sometimes, a lot of executive directors they've been used to kind of working in a certain way. And now you have to kind of, really kind of bring yourself to the conversation. And as Candace mentioned earlier, is just, having the relationship to say, I would really like to walk alongside you, because that's the only way that I can really and truly support you in the efforts of the organization, through what I'm, giving the task to do. So I think that is definitely important. And another thing that I would say for CEOs or executive directors is, just understanding how to create a harmonious balance between all departments, marketing, because sometimes people, like, I think they look at development as, well, you don't have to, there's no degree for that, marketing, that's a specific skill set. Finance, that's a specific skill set. Most of the people in fundraising, like Lenox said, we have some skills and some gifts and talents that kind of fold us into these positions. And then we find our niche and we grow and we develop our own selves into development. And then we have to work really, really hard to kind of get the respect of everyone around us in an organization, to understand how we have truly become a part of how this works. And it's easy for us to get left out of conversations. It's easy for us to be like, oh, well, your job is just to raise the money. You don't have to be in this meeting. We'll tell you what you need to do once we come out of this meeting. I don't think that's how it needs to work. And I think that does start at the top and says, no, we are not able to do what we do if we don't have the support of our development department, and they need to be a part of this conversation. So I think, just really creating a community and a structure in your organization that is very inclusive of your fundraisers and your development department, no matter what. We're not just here to raise money and to pay salaries, but we're here to help, sustain the organization, and our being a part of that conversation, our being a part of those meetings helps us, strengthen what we do.
Absolutely. So we're speaking of access, this is a great segue that y'all set me up for. There are other aspects of nonprofit administration that development people really need to know about to do their job effectively. It's not just necessarily about being in the same room when the budget's being created. It's about how do you budget, right? It's about how does that even happen? I know that when I was at Hope House, I've told this story a bazillion times, so I apologize if you've heard it before, people. So I'm sitting in a board meeting, my first board meeting, and something comes up about depreciation. And I did not have any sort of accounting background at that point. I had I've had classes since then, but and real world experience, but I had no clue what they were talking about. And I left there sort of perplexed about like, what is this? And then I had to go look it up, and then I had to get somebody to explain it to me. The accounting piece is something that development directors need access to. There's the board governance piece that you work very closely with your board as a fundraiser. So understanding how boards work, what that looks like is pretty important. So what other are there other pieces of nonprofit administration that y'all need to know, or y'all think other people need to know, to really do their job effectively. And also, I will say, the person most likely to become your executive director is going to be your development director. So, this is also about grooming the next incoming executive director for your organization too. So, what are some things that I'm missing other than board governance and accounting stuff?
I think it depends on the fundraiser, because like Lenox and Jeanette said, every development person's path to development is so different. And so we always come with a different combination of skills. And I think the most important professional development piece is understanding that you have to have at least the baseline understanding of every department in your organization. And that sounds like a tall order, because it is. And I think it's also why in the first year of a development staffer's time in the organization, the expectation is to learn a lot. And then you really start making money in year two. Because year one that's your education year. That's how you get to know everybody. And then we'll see what you can do in year two. Because you do have to have at least a basic understanding of, like you said, finance and board governance and marketing and project management and high level tax and fundraising law. And there's so many things you need to be effective that it takes some time.
And to piggyback off of what Candace said, and access, we all have different skill sets, but just giving us access to and giving us permission to be able to scout out what we need, because what Candace need, I may not need. Lenox may already have a really strong, relationship with finance. So that might not be the training that she needs to seek after, but dealing with the board and understanding relationships with them and how they function may be something that she needs. But giving us permission to do a lot of the staff development that we talked about earlier, giving us permission to ask questions and be in these places, and I think for me, one of the things, being in a new organization, it does take you about a year to learn all the different aspects of these departments, and you're trying to build relationships with for me at Collage is you're developing relationships with donors, but also parents, because a lot of those parents become donors. So you really have to be given the opportunity to spread yourself out a little bit, so that I'm learning more about the conservatory. I'm learning more about how the professional company works. I've never been in the arts before, so just really understanding that there's a difference in how this organization works as opposed to the organization that I worked before. So I definitely would say having access to the finance director or the finance person, and saying hey, is it possible for me to have access? I don't need full access to the software, but I need to also be able to run a report, to get what I need for a grant. You may be out, so I don't need to sit here and put the grant on hold if I'm trying to look for a certain amount of expenses. I'm trying to look for the total number of artists or whatever. I can do that on my own if you give me access. So I think really creating, the access to getting these resources is really important to our growth.
I think the only thing I would add is just providing flexibility for your development director. We have a constant joke at work that I'm like, I wish I hated y'all because I get nothing done here, because I chit chat with my coworkers a lot. And we work with really cute kids, and I'm on the playground a lot, and I get nothing done when I'm at the office. And Betty is extremely flexible in my needs and really is helpful when I need, to work from home because I have a grant and it's like writing a term paper and you just need to be like in it at your desk with nobody around you. Or, just knowing that there are things that are really stressful, like, Kevin had talked about, just the weight that's on a development director. Like in the ice storm, when the ice storm hit and I had to get a grant in that day, and I woke up with no power at my house. We were like one of the first people to go out. I drive to Hope House quick as I can. There's a tree on Hope House. We have no power, no bill, can't even get in the building. So I drive to Panera, and this sweet man let me share a table with him, share an outlet with him. And, I'm just we're all packed in there like sardines, and I'm just typing away. And I remember Betty being like, don't stress, it's okay. It's okay if you don't get this in. And I was like, no, it's 12 people's salaries. I have to get this in. Like, I don't know why you're saying this. And I think she was just trying to make me feel better. But I was thinking, a program could shut down if I don't get this in. And so just like being aware that like that's the kind of weight that's on somebody, just like maybe our program staff, the weight of our families' challenges are on them. We definitely are all in to make sure that we can keep these programs together, and just remembering that. And of course, then Betty's like, don't come in, tomorrow. And I'm like, great, I had no power for 10 days anyway, so I wasn't gonna. But no, I'm just kidding. I had to come in so I could do my laundry at Hope House and all that stuff. So, but just like being really flexible and open. And I think that's something that like Betty is phenomenal at. And I hope that I will emulate one day if I was in her role. And so that's something I think is just most important, is just the flexibility, because the development director's job is very different from other jobs, and it's just needs a lot of flexibility for sure.
Absolutely. One thing that I'll add is that there's a cultural competency piece to a lot of the work that we do that directors of development are not often like prioritized in this. And I will say that as a white male walking into Hope House, when I started Hope House, I had nothing in common with the people that were being served there, and I had a huge learning curve. And I look back at some of the stupid things that I did that I wish I could get the time machine, and and even the way I would frame things came from a certain lens that was, I think that there's always going to be some space for additional, I don't want to say DEI work, but like cultural competency around the communities you're serving. Because everywhere I've gone, I've been in social services. Up until Momentum, I was in social services, and I didn't have anything in common with the people I was serving. So don't forget your development staff when you're thinking about cultural competency, when you're onboarding them, about who these folks are, because I've heard development folks say really stigmatizing things about the people they're serving. I've also heard CEOs say that too. But it's something that I keep seeing again and again, and even the way you frame your annual fund letter and things like that, that stuff really does matter, because the development people are the voice of the organization. Besides the CEO, they're the second voice out in the community. So final question, and then we'll open up for audience questions. So besides professional development, what other types of support do you need as a development staff person?
I think for me, and I've seen it with when I say my team, I mean the other human that we added in October, because before it was just Candace for a very long time. Excuse me, is a growth plan, because one of the common just like personality traits for fundraisers is that we're ambitious, goal-oriented people. And so if you're working in a position that doesn't have a professional growth path for you, just like you're driven by the hunt of, finding money for this position, you're going to be driven and motivated professionally by your next opportunity. And so if that's not there, I know for myself, and then I've seen it in other people in the field, and also in the person that is working with me, if it's not very clear that growth is there for you, and you're also, I think because we're in this space, I'll say something that can be sensitive, but if you're not paid well to do the job you're doing, then not that your passion for the work is different, but kind of like what Lenox said, the amount of stress that is just innate in development will wear on you much quicker. because at least for me, having a goal and having something to work for is in and of itself refreshing. So even though I know like, oh man, this is hard. Like I worked at Panera in an ice storm, or for me, I was the only one with power. And so I had not a 3-bedroom apartment, 11 people, because we had power and a lot of our family didn't. I was writing a grant in a closet and I was totally fine with it because I knew that what I was doing was important, but I also have a lot of love for the organization. And I know that that's a two-way street because they really care about like what the next step in my career is. And they really care about me as a professional. So outside of just traditional professional development, knowing that there's growth for you and there's opportunity has been very important.
Candace, that just made me think too, just about, making sure that I think the three of us all share a passion for, the organizations that we work for. But I think that's sometimes easy to get disconnected from when you're in an office writing a grant, or you're out talking to donors and you're not maybe working directly with with the programs. And so making sure that the development director does have an opportunity to connect with your mission. Because I love those days that I get to be in the classrooms and or hang with our parents and be able to just really connect. Also, like Kevin was saying, if you cannot relate maybe in a way to the people that you're serving, like being able to really have conversations where you're understanding they're being served or how they feel about the organization is really helpful to get that feedback, and like knowing not just our donors' point of view, but our other constituents' point of view, our customers, the people that we are serving. And so I think it's equally as important for a development director, and really having that connection on a lot of levels is going to be helpful for the organization, but then also helpful for them to just stay connected to that mission. And however you can do that is, going to be different for all organizations. But I think that's really helpful. At Hope House, a little easier because I can just walk outside my office and talk to people.
I miss that. I miss that playground. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I agree with Lenox. One of the things that I'm learning a lot more of is, just because I've never worked in the arts before, but having that time to go in, and I've been spending a lot of time with the company dancers, and there's a lot of stories that kind of help to build and frame, what we write about, through interaction with them. Just some of the kids from the conservatory and some of the parents, and I think just being connected to them. And giving us the opportunity to have the freedom in the day to do that, to get up from my desk. And that's one of the things I really enjoy, is being able to change scenery at Collage and move from the office to the studios, and sit down and have a conversation with some of the dancers about their stories and how they got into dancing, or how dancing changed their life. One lady, she was a parent, was sitting there talking to me about the trajectory that her son was on, just spiraling down, and how this being a part of Collage gave him discipline. It gave him, a different sense of appreciation for who he was as a person, and gave him, so just listen to these things, help us to tell a different story about the organization, and in being engaged in that. And another thing that I think, Candace was talking about compensation, and I was like, I remember at one of my jobs, I had this thing I found online, and I printed it, and it says, "Don't praise me if you ain't gonna raise me." So, so
writing that down.
Yeah, so and it's different little things like that. I think at the end of the day, yes, we want to hear that we've done a great job. Thank you so much, for your efforts. But at the same time, there needs to be some kind of balance here, right? Because I do think fundraisers are probably the least paid in the organization, and we have to really work hard to move up that ladder. So definitely want to create some time for that. But also I think Candace and I both had this conversation, is just being able to take a real time off from the office without people texting and calling. Like, respect the fact that If it's a sick day, she's sick, no calls. If they're on vacation, they're on vacation, so that we can feel comfortable and not stressed on vacation, thinking like, oh my God, when I get back, I'm gonna have a swarm of work to do. And people are I know I got 15,000 emails, but really creating an opportunity for your development people who really put in some long hours, because I remember being at the museum. I mean, it wasn't anything for me to look up and it's 8 o'clock at night and I'm still working, so just, and everybody else has gone home, so just understanding that a little bit more and giving us a little bit more grace when it comes to, how we work, so that would be probably what I would say.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. No,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
thank you. The Lenox and Jeanette, you all both talked about spending time with your programs, and I think that's something that I take for granted sometimes, but it's probably the most important part of the job is spending time either helping to put together a program or helping to facilitate. Like, I intentionally volunteer for events like as a volunteer so that I get to experience organization in a different way. But just sitting in one of the classes or going to go walk around the museum, I think that was a really good point that I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of. Like, getting to know the organization as a donor or as a customer is probably like the best exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, y'all were perfect. Y'all were great. Yeah, y'all shed so much light on some really great things.